Good evening and welcome to M's Kitchen. It is 2 days before Mother's Day in the UK and we are making carrot cake, very easy carrot cake recipe tonight. So what I've done is I'm going to talk you through the recipe and then I will share at a later point, obviously once the cake is baked, how to ice it. Because remember, this cake bakes for roughly about an hour. So you need to have a bit of patience. So what I've done is I have taken 3 extra large eggs. Extra large eggs are surprisingly hard to find in the UK. You're more likely to find large ones and try and choose the biggest ones you can get. But anyway, so I've got 3 eggs in this bowl. And to that I'm going to add 1.5 cups of sugar. Now you can use normal sugar, but I want it to be really light. So I'm going to use caster sugar and it just makes it a bit easier. So the key thing to remember with any method like this is you want it to rise. It's got a lot of, well, in this case carrots in it, but anything that's got fruit in, etc. needs more of a rising agent, so you need to kind of accelerate the air in the cake. So I just want to show you, put my hand under there so it doesn't drip everywhere. You want it really light and airy, okay? You don't want to overmix this. You've literally just beaten in the sugar into this egg. That's why I've used caster sugar, because it's easier. So now the recipe asks for 3 cups of carrots, which I've grated. And in this bowl I have got 2.5 cups of just normal flour. I've got 5 mils of cinnamon, 7 mils of baking powder, 5 mils of bicarb of soda, and it's asked for 5 mils of salt, which I think is excessive, so I've just changed that to a pinch, which is about between 1 and 2 mils. So I'm just sieving this together, and the reason for doing it this way around, now the recipe would ask you typically to put 1 cup of oil, which I've got over here. Put 1 cup of oil into this mixture, then the carrots. I have learned from experience that's not the best way to do it, because if you put the carrots in first and you add the flour in afterwards, the flour sort of gets stuck around the carrots. So what I do is I've just pre-measured 1 cup of, this is just sunflower oil, and I'm just going to add this in to the mixture. I'm not going to mix it at this stage. I'm going to actually add in the flour, and I'm just using this spatula just to, you know, so that not so much oil is actually left in the container. And then to that I'm just going to add this mixture that I've sieved. So 2.5 cups of flour, 7 mils of baking powder, 5 mils bicarb, and 2 mils of salt, and 5 mils of cinnamon. So I'm just adding this to this mixture. Surprisingly thick, actually, at this point. Now this cake doesn't use any milk, okay? So the liquid comes from the oil. And I think I'm going to actually add just a tad more oil, because it's a little bit thicker than what I would normally like it to be. So I'm not going to add a lot of more oil. I'm just going to add about a tiny bit more, just to improve the moisture content of it a little bit. Because like I say, it's just a little bit. I'm just doing this by eye. It's just a little bit thicker, more thick than I would like it. Now, remember, carrots has got quite a lot of water in it. I've grated the carrots. Okay, so I'm going to add in the carrots to this carrot cake. That's probably like the most important thing in here. So I've got 3 cups of carrots that I've grated. I tend to rough grate them purely and simply because I find that it's a pain if you try and do it too finely. But obviously, depending if you're using a food processor or something, it might change it slightly. But like I say, so I've just got 3 cups of carrots now. It's about, so I'd say between 500, I'd say roughly about 500 grams of carrots. I'm actually just going to change to a wooden spoon, and I'm just going to mix in the carrots. I wouldn't use an electric whisk at this stage. You can, of course, but the reason I don't do it is because I like to, you know, make sure that it's mixed in properly. And I find sometimes that if you do it by, if you do it by the mixer, it beats it further. So now you can see the moisture from the carrots is making this a lot more liquid. But like I say, the reason I'm adding the carrots in last is because it's just from experience. I find it creates better distribution and you don't have flour, well, everywhere. And magic, at last, 5 mils of vanilla. And again, I just do this by eye. So what you've got is you've got this mixture. Now it's quite a big cake. So what you can do is you can put this into a square cake pan. I've just happened to, I like silicone because I find it gets it off quite easy afterwards. So what I've done is I've treated this silicone mold with spray and cook. But silicone is notorious for getting wobbly and spilling stuff everywhere when you try and bake it. So I always put it on a flat surface, a plate or a pan or something. So I'm just transferring this mixture into this cake mold. I'm just getting it all in there. Now this cake bakes for 60 to 70 minutes. That's an hour and up to an hour and 10 minutes. Now, so what I've done is the recipe asks for you to bake it at 180 degrees. Now I don't bake it at 180 degrees purely and simply because I find that it makes it too brown. And I don't like my cake so brown at the top. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting the last bit out. So I preheated this oven, as I said, at 150 degrees because this is a convection and fan oven. And I found from experience that it just it bakes quite quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just quickly going to rinse these mixers. If you're wondering what I'm doing in the background, I'm just cleaning the mixers, because I'm just going to show you while the cake is baking how to do the icing. Now there's a few different varieties. There's a few different ways of doing this particular of doing icing for carrot cake. Carrot cake is quite a sugary type cake, but it hasn't got it. Obviously, it's got quite a bit of sugar, 1.5 cups. But you can reduce the sugar. You don't need to have quite 1.5 cups. I'm just cleaning up really quickly. But what I've done is I have taken. I'll talk you through the first. Icing, just to give you some quantities. That uses 375 mils. That's 1.5 cups of icing sugar. If you use icing sugar, always sieve icing sugar first, because icing sugar that's not sieved is notoriously difficult. It always creates lumps when you mix it. And then you use 50 mils of orange juice, and you use 125 mils of coconut. So that's a really nice, and it's kind of a bit like a drizzle that you just pour over the carrot cake. Now, I love carrot cake with this kind of a sweet and sour cottage cheesy look or taste. I think it's the best combination with carrot cake. And so what I've done is I've taken and I've adapted this recipe because this is just because I can. So I've taken 2 cups of icing sugar, 500 mils, And to that I've added 50 mils of butter, margarine actually in this case, because it doesn't actually really matter. You can use butter, the recipe calls for butter, but remember it's quite cold still and it's raining outside, so the butter would be more solid and it would make it harder to mix. So what I've done is I've just put in 50 mils of butter in there, and so I'm just going to dry these, and I've got 200 mils of just full fat soft cheese. Okay, you can use, you are supposed to really use full fat, but you can, I've successfully done this, used low fat cottage cheese. Any kind will do, it doesn't really matter, you know, the brand is kind of irrelevant. And you just mix this in. What you can do is, if you want it slightly more sour, you can use something like a like a lemon, bit of lemon zest. You can use some orange zest, just a bit of grated, in other words, just a bit of grated orange skin. It just gives it that little tang to it, which is actually quite nice. It's really refreshing because the carrot cake is well, any oil-based cake tends to be quite moist. So I'm just putting this cream cheese in. Now the thing to remember with icing sugar is when you beat icing sugar with a mixer, it's quite messy. Okay, so be warned, it tends to go everywhere. Okay, hopefully with any luck we won't have that problem, but I'm going to start this off slowly. Okay, so otherwise, because you know, it just goes everywhere. Yeah, and see, it goes everywhere. So this powder thing that you can see going on here, that's the icing sugar. Doesn't really matter what icing sugar you use. You know, you get so many different types. I just use plain icing sugar. Because you're perfectly easy to mix this by hand. You really don't need a blender. It's just a little bit quicker, and I find that if you use a hand blender, it just makes it a bit smoother. But it is really super fast, and I can turn up the speed of it. I'm just going to add this in by hand just to make sure I've got everything in. I mean, the thing that's quite easy, or that's quite interesting to remember, you can just use a normal metal spoon. This is perfectly easy to do. If you do it that way, I would suggest you put the butter in, then add the icing sugar, and then the cottage cheese, or just add the cottage, you know, the butter, always the butter first if you mix it by hand, then add the cottage cheese, and then add the icing sugar to that. Now, I just want to make sure this is all properly mixed in. So with this icing sugar, obviously the sugar does preserve it, but you can, you know, you wouldn't leave this out for too long because obviously it has got cream cheese in it. So, but sugar is a preserver. Okay, so you don't really need to worry. And so this is quite a runny consistency, which is fine. What you can do, and I'm just going to taste it. It's lovely. What you can do, you can add more icing sugar. And this is still quite, you know, quite a sort of a solid one. What you can also do is, if you wanted to make it even thicker, you can add cream to this. But you do need to whip the cream then. So I'd say about 200 mils of double cream, and you whip it up into a kind of a stiff peak stage and mix that into that. But then it means it's really, really rich, and you've almost doubled the calories. Okay, so, but you're not going to eat loads and loads of carrot cake, so unless you're planning to eat the whole cake, you should be fine. But this is a really nice way to do it. I'm going to put this icing in the fridge just to chill it. It will make it set a little bit more. I like to make it, and carrot cake lasts really well. So carrot cake can last for about a week. It is because of the oil content. It does keep it nice and moist for quite a bit of time. There's lots of other ways you can make carrot cake. You can put in things like pineapple. Pineapple gives it a slightly different taste, but you've got to be careful with consistencies then. You do have to look at the sort of measures in terms of the flour to call it fruit-vegetable ratio. I tend to bake because I enjoy baking stuff for other people. I don't tend to bake for myself because, you know, I can't possibly eat all those cakes. So I will share my how to ice the cake once it's baked. It does have to cool down. I'm going to put the icing sugar in the fridge and leave it there until the cake is baked. And then I'd wait probably about, depending on the temperature, probably about 15 minutes roughly. I'd let the cake cool down for, and then I will ice it.